Dr. Rath. Doctor?
Good evening. I will speak in English, and I hope the translation works. For those of you who do not have a translation set, you may get one. We are truly facing exciting times. And I'm happy to be here in Cyprus to talk to you. I heard that there was no money spent on public advertising for this event. I don't know whether it is true, but this is what I've been told. So everyone here came because there was a connection, a personal connection to this event, to who we are. And in this moment, I would like to thank Dr. Katsonis, his wife, the entire Katsonis family, the entire movement of life, the people around them that made this event happen and that are doing this fantastic work in Cyprus and beyond. Without you, we would not be able to communicate the results of our research. Without you, everything we found out would be silent, would not talk. So I'm deeply grateful for the work you're doing here in Cyprus, and I'm flattered to see the result of your work over the past years in this room, and I heard there's another room outside. Why are we living in exciting times? In 2012, I gave a lecture in Athens, and I said, I cannot understand why a country like Greece is importing energy in form of gasoline and gas, while having 320 sunshine days a year. That is way before Tesla came to Greece or to Cyprus. That was way before the governments of the world rallied to be the first to have fossil-free traffic in their countries. Today, we saw a change over the last years that we would not have thought possible just a little time ago. We foresee the reality of a fossil-free energy supply around the world. Now, I'm not a technical person. I'm not an engineer. I'm a medical doctor. But what you will hear tonight about healthcare and about medicine, about the research we have been fighting for the last quarter of a century, in 5 years down the road, you will remember this day. Because much of what you see and hear tonight will be reality. In the doctor's offices, in the hospitals, in the health food stores, and in the schools of the world. And this is a good moment to also welcome the doctors, the therapists, the teachers, the health food store community. All of you are educators of the new. I gave my talk the title Breakthrough Towards the Natural Control of Cardiovascular Disease. It is a long title. I could shorten it. We are on the verge of controlling the #1 killer in the world, based on a completely new understanding of the true, genuine causes of these health problems. Now, let's see. I have a fantastic instrument here. Yeah, it works. Today's topics. When we talk about cardiovascular disease, there are a variety of health conditions that are usually subsumized under this title. Tonight we'll be talking about coronary heart disease, leading to heart attacks, cerebrovascular disease, the hardening of the arteries to the brain that lead to strokes, and we will touch on some related forms of cardiovascular disease like heart failure, arrhythmia. I will not be able to touch all the topics because time is limited, and this is why I recommend for those of you who want to know more about high blood pressure, diabetic, and other problems to read the book that is, I heard, available outside, or get it online. You don't need to buy it. You can read it for free online. I'll throw the website later. This is the problem. 1/3 of the people of the world today, at the beginning of the 21st century, are still dying from one health condition. That's cardiovascular disease. Latest statistics of the World Health Organization says it's about 18 million people each year from one health condition. Now, there's a law in medicine, and that says an epidemic like cardiovascular disease, we're not talking about an infectious epidemic, we talk about 18 million people dying from the epidemic of cardiovascular disease. An epidemic exists only as long as the true causes of this disease are not understood. Everyone in this room understands this logic. You don't need to study medicine. Are there interest groups? Are there company interests that make money from cardiovascular disease? There are. Do you think these companies have an interest that you understand the nature of cardiovascular disease and can prevent it? No. Okay, that was my lecture. Thank you for coming. There are important questions. If there are doctors here, they know exactly what I'm talking about. Important questions of cardiology, of heart disease, that no doctor can answer at this point in time. The first one, why do we get infarctions of the heart, but rarely of other organs? Why do we get arteriosclerosis, which means the hardening of the arteries, but not venosclerosis? The cholesterol level is the same in the arteries and the veins. So if high cholesterol were the true cause of cardiovascular disease, we would get not just heart attacks and strokes, we would get nose attacks, elbow attacks, knee attacks, everywhere, at the same rate. Again, you don't need to be a medical doctor to understand there is a problem. And again, you understand very easily that there are company interests, mainly those who produce and sell cholesterol-lowering drugs, who want to tell you that they know better. But human logic defies that thinking. And finally, why do animals not get heart attacks, but people do? There are animals that have heart problems, but they are at old age. But no living mammal species, neither your dogs, nor your cats, nor your canary birds, nor any other species that are living as mammals or house animals, knows cardiovascular disease as an epidemic, killing 1/3 of that species. So again, there are some open questions, some phenomena that every doctor that is being trained at this point should be able to answer, and they cannot. That's why I'm here. That's why you don't hear what you're hearing tonight on television. And that's why you are important. If you leave this room later tonight and you are convinced that you heard something that is important, that is life-changing, I want you to think what your role can be in helping to communicate this message. Let me illustrate that with the next picture. This is the city of Maastricht. This is where I and my family live. The city of Maastricht is known to have high levels of calcium in the water. So ever since the water pipelines were built, they clogged from the calcium deposits. Was it just one house? It was the entire city. Everywhere the pipeline went, the pipeline was clogged. Why do I bring this example? The human body, everyone that sits here has a pipeline of blood vessels that is 100,000 kilometers long. I'm not making this up. 100,000 kilometers of arteries, veins, and above all, capillaries. Why do they fail in 95% on 30 centimeters of the coronary arteries? You cannot explain it. So this picture, whenever you are confronted with someone who says, I have high cholesterol, I need to lower my cholesterol level, don't forget this picture. Cholesterol has never been, is not, and will never be the primary cause of cardiovascular disease. Because we would get general clogging of our arteries if the water or the blood quality would be bad. Did you understand that? So these next pictures, they take you back 25, 30 years by now in my own life. The quest to solve the puzzle of cardiovascular disease. This is a quarter of a century ago. George mentioned that I worked with Linus Pauling in California. He had been a pioneer in the area of vitamin research, mainly in the field of the flu and cancer. When he heard about the work that I've been privileged to conduct with my colleagues at Hamburg, he invited me. He said, let's start a collaboration on cardiovascular disease. So I left everything behind. It was like Odysseus burning his ships. My colleagues at the cardiovascular center in Berlin at that time, they said, you cannot come back if you work with that maverick. So it was a decision of taking that route or another one. I took the right road. There are 3 publications that relate to cardiovascular disease that I shared with Linus Pauling and asked him to be a co-author. I'm not going into technical details, but the title alone, Solution to the Puzzle of Human Cardiovascular Disease. I was reluctant to use this title, but Linus said, if you are convinced that something is the case, you need to say it, because otherwise people don't understand you. So this title was already the result of the logic behind the concept at that time. What are we talking about? This is the cross-section of an artery. You see the dark red staining here, which is the normal artery wall. And this part, the light part inside, these are plaques, deposits that occur over many years or decades. While this is an event of years, the actual clogging, the thrombus formation that interrupts the blood flow through this blood vessel wall is an event of seconds. A heart attack, or the occlusion, the closing of this artery in an acute situation, belongs into a hospital. But we talk tonight about how to prevent this hardening, the buildup of this plaque, which is an event that takes place over years and gives us time to stop it if we understand how it comes. Conventional research, the textbooks of medicine, cardiology today, they teach that the main culprit of causing these deposits are lipids, fat molecules, namely the bad cholesterol, LDL. Everyone has heard about the bad cholesterol here. Now, what is bad cholesterol? Now, fat doesn't swim in the bloodstream like in a soup. It is transported in a particle, a round particle here. That's the fat molecule. And in order that this fat molecule knows where to go to which cells, where to bind to, it has a protein that gives both the structure as well as the communication, where to go to. And these two together, the fat and the protein, make lipoprotein. Low-density lipoprotein is the bad cholesterol. For about half a century, researchers before us have isolated this bad cholesterol particle from human atherosclerotic deposits. And they said, oh my God, if we find this molecule inside the artery wall of people, it must be the cause of cardiovascular disease. Well, today we know better. My role in this entire field started in the early 1980s at the University of Hamburg. We looked into the question, is it really the bad cholesterol that builds up these plaques? Or is there something else? And we found there is something else. This bad cholesterol that you already know has an adhesive tape, a protein that is very sticky, wrapped around. And it turns the bad cholesterol into a modified LDL particle, which is called lipoprotein small a. The A stands for this adhesive tape here. Don't worry, I will not get more technical. We tested, is it LDL, or is it really necessary that this sticky protein is required to bind the bad cholesterol particle inside the artery wall? And without going into details, you can see when we checked for the LDL protein, which is called ApoB100, you see this staining. And here, when we checked for the adhesive tape, you see this staining. And everyone in this room can see it's the same pattern. So everywhere we find LDL, we find the adhesive tape. That was the beginning of a thorough investigation in bypass patients that came to the University of Hamburg for bypass operation, and in patients who had died from cardiovascular disease, and we analyzed the content of the deposits of their arteries. And what we found is the larger the deposits in the arteries are, the more of this sticky, bad cholesterol, the lipoprotein A, is found inside the artery wall. From normal to complicated deposits. It took about 20 more years until this knowledge was accepted by established cardiology. And it was discovered over the years, not just by our team, but by many other researchers, that lipoprotein A is the leading risk factor, not just for heart attacks, but also for strokes, for patients that have a blocked bypass after bypass operation, and that have a blocked artery after balloon catheters have been performed. And it took until 2010, which was roughly 26 years after we published these results, that the European Heart Association made an official statement saying goodbye to the bad cholesterol as the main culprit, and said, no, we recommend screening for elevated lipoprotein A in those patients at intermediate or high cardiovascular risk. Now the next question we were of course interested was, what is the role of this particle? Clinical medicine, medical research, they sometimes have the tendency to find something bad. And they accept the fact that, okay, a heart attack happened. It's just a strike of fate, bad luck. But that principle does not exist in nature. Anything that happens in our body is the action, in most cases, the reaction of something that makes sense, of a regulatory principle. Let's look into the question, what is the principle behind lipoprotein A? The fantastic thing that led me into this research on lipoprotein A was that it is present in humans, but not in other species, with very few exceptions. So here is a particle, a metabolic particle, a risk factor that contributes like nothing else to the killing of 18 million human beings each year. And it is not found in dogs, cats, horses, you name it. Isn't that a puzzle? And when I presented this to Linus Pauling, that's when he said, you have to come. We need to solve this. So, in summary, people do not produce, forgot this part. And the lipoprotein A is present in humans and not in other animals. And this relates to something else that is exactly inverse. And that is the ability to produce vitamin C in the body. So none of you can produce vitamin C in the body, but your house animals, in fact, all mammals can. So there was this inverse relationship. We just cannot produce vitamin C, and we have this high risk factor in our body genetically. Animals can produce vitamin C and they don't have this risk factor. So that was what got Linus interested. And here's the answer to this question. Vitamin C, we all know that, is important to stabilize our connective tissue. It is the most important element that produces collagen. The artery walls in your body, in fact, most of the tissue that makes up your body is made of collagen molecules. You see them up here. They provide the principal stability to your body. Now, why are the arteries of your body so vulnerable to vitamin C deficiency? Why did the sailors 500, 600 years ago die of bleeding when they had too little vitamin C, when they had scurvy? Why is that? What sets the arteries apart from other organs in the body? Well, it is the pressure, the blood pressure. The pressure in your arteries is 100, 120, 150, sometimes even higher. If there is a stable situation of that artery, if there is enough collagen, that pressure does not affect the stability of the artery wall. If you are suffering from vitamin deficiency, namely vitamin C deficiency, if you have an early form of scurvy, if your artery wall is unstable, that's where the problem occurs. We are not immediately bleeding like the sailors did. So open scurvy today is the exception. But we all get too little vitamins in our diet, generally speaking. So little cracks and crevices open up between the layers of cells that shape the blood vessels. And that's where the problem starts. Your body signalizes, hey, there's a problem. Not consciously, obviously, but for example, to the liver. So the artery wall communicates with your liver through signals, biological signals, not energy, biological signals, so-called cytokines, and says, hey, give me repair molecules to mend the problem I'm facing here. Do you understand that thought? And suddenly it becomes clear what the role of this lipoprotein A molecule is. It is a fantastic repair molecule for a body that suffers from scurvy, that is at the risk of dying from scurvy, because when you lose blood, you die. Most of the sailors suffering from scurvy never returned because they died. So this is a deadly threat. And now we suddenly understand how it can be that humans have this fantastic repair molecule, because only those that came up with this repair molecule survived. The rest died from scurvy. Now you live in Nicosia or in Cyprus, you probably think, well, this is a good place to be because it's so warm. But think about the ice ages that covered the northern hemisphere of our planet for millennia, tens of thousands of years, and they came back. And people were living in these areas or in the adjacent areas to the glaciers. So none of these people had sufficient fresh fruit. So all of them were exposed to nutritional deficiency, and the greatest threat for the survival of human race, the greatest reason why you are here tonight is the fact that some of our ancestors came up with this fantastic repair molecule, which protected our ancestors, especially the young ones, newly born babies, from dying from scurvy. Only if you had a risk factor like this in your system, where you were able to grow up and reproduce, have your own children. So suddenly we understand why everyone here in this room has this gene, because everyone else died. Now, I'm going to skip this for time reasons. But we need to understand that this lipoprotein A molecule is a life-saving molecule initially. But when this repair goes on and on and on, in other words, if you have years of vitamin deficiency in your diet, then this repair overshoots and becomes a problem in itself by forming the deposits. This was published in 1990, 1991, the publications that I showed you, so 28 years ago, as a concept, as a thought that I had as a scientist that I shared with Linus. He supported it. He said, you need to write about this. And we did. We didn't have proof. It was just pure logic. So then, over the years, we said, well, how can we prove this? Obviously, we cannot do it in humans. It is simply unethical to do a clinical study and say, hey, you are not getting enough vitamins, and we see you when you die. We cannot do that. So the only way was to use an animal model that we genetically implant the human characteristics of heart disease, of atherosclerosis. And these are, as you can see, two. One, vitamin C deficiency, and one, lipoprotein A must be there. In other words, we created an animal model that was different from the regular animals and that mimicked the metabolism of humans. So we knocked out the ability of these animals to produce vitamin C in their bodies. So they became completely dependent on the vitamin C in the diet. And we inserted the gene for producing human lipoprotein A. What did we have in mind when we made this? We were certainly, I have dogs myself, and I'm an animal lover, but this question is so important for 18 million people each year. It's a question of life and death that we had to do these experiments. And what do you think was the first question we were interested in? Well, it's kind of logic. We were interested in what happens to the animal that does not produce vitamin C and produce this repair molecule if we feed these animals too little vitamins, especially vitamin C. What will happen to their arteries? Will they become scorbutic? Will they develop the cracks and lesions that are the main cause of humans? And here's the answer. These model animals that mimic human metabolism as it relates to atherosclerosis do not produce their own vitamin C. When they get too little vitamin C in the diet, they develop the same cracks and lesions like we humans do in our arteries. This is a cross-section through one of the arteries of these animals. And this is one of the animals that had too little vitamins in the diet. You remember these structures? They are the regular artery wall, and these light red structures, they are the plaques. So they develop the plaques, just like in the human system. And the animals that do not produce enough vitamins, that do not produce vitamin C in their body, just like we humans, and that get enough vitamin C in the diet, they have clean arteries. And now we come to this phenomenon that I raised in the beginning. Why do we get infarctions in the heart and not in the elbow? What do you think? What sets the heart apart from any other organ in the body? It pumps, it moves. And the coronary arteries, they're right on top of the heart. And so this is where the underlying problem of instability of the artery wall is exposed first. Right there. And this is why we get heart attacks and not nose attacks. And in this system that we tested here, exactly the same thing happened. We saw the deposits developing. This is a coronary artery here of this animal model. And you see that it is inside these coronary arteries that these deposits develop, or at the branching regions where two arteries leave one stem and there are turbulences. This is also where in the human system we have these deposits. So you can cause atherosclerosis as researcher in just about any animal. But you need to feed them cholesterol and lard to reach levels of 1,000 or 1,500 milligrams per deciliter. Below that, they don't get atherosclerosis because they have enough vitamin C to protect their arteries produced endogenously. Are you still with me?
Yes.
And remember, conventional medicine says, oh, it is the high cholesterol that is starting the process of atherosclerosis. We say, modern medicine, what we know, says this is wrong. The problem starts with a breakdown of the connective tissue, of the collagen molecules, of the border of the artery wall. And this is exactly what we find in these animals. You can see that the structure here, it is a little bit maintained, these parallel structures. They are reflective of healthy portions of this wall, but here it's completely dissolved. There are gaps that make it possible for molecules from the blood to enter the blood vessel wall. Yeah, let's cross this one off your list. Maybe we snooze here. Maybe from the technical department someone can help us on this one. And now I'm continuing. The most important question that we have in this entire... Thanks. I was afraid you would push the restart button. The most important question, of course, was, will we find this repair molecule at the sites of the deposits. In other words, would we identify the physiological role of this deadly risk factor, lipoprotein or lipoprotein A, as actually being something helpful, a repair factor that starts entering the wall as a response to the cracks and to the lesions that develop there? And the answer to that you can see in this picture is yes, we can use an antibody, we can mark the deposition of lipoprotein A even in early lesions, in early beginning atherosclerosis, right at the border. Up here is the bloodstream, and this is the beginning of the artery wall, and here is the bloodstream of the control animal, and here is the beginning of the artery wall. And you can see there is a deposition everywhere where it's brown. It means that LPA is being deposited in this area. These are the animals that have low vitamin C. You have the deposition there. And these are those that have high vitamin C levels in their diet. Again, both of the animals do not manufacture vitamin C endogenously. We published this just for the doctors and therapists in the audience, and you can read the entire article online. This is the fantastic research team that did the work. Dr. Nitzwicki is the head of the institute. That's our institute in California. And creating such an animal model is not something that you do from Tuesday to Wednesday. It took them 5 years to come up with this animal, and it's the only institute in the world that has this fantastic model to study human atherosclerosis. So if there are students or doctors here from the University of Nicosia or from the University of Cyprus, and they are interested to use these animal models to confirm these aspects or other aspects, just contact us. We're interested to work together with others in spreading this knowledge. Consequences of this new understanding for cardiology today, I'm summarizing. First, we know the role of this risk factor lipoprotein A. It is a mobile repair molecule that uses LDL, the fat molecule, as a transport vehicle in blood to reach the sites of tissue repair. So, repair molecule. LPA is a perfect repair molecule for the vascular wall structurally impaired by vitamin deficiency at the beginning. So atherosclerosis also gets a new definition. We now understand that the deposits, the atherosclerotic plaques that kill people from heart attacks and strokes, is not something God sent down on planet Earth to punish the unfaithful people.
Or to make the pharmaceutical industry rich.
Well, that of course. It is something that makes sense. The atherosclerotic plaque is initially a life-saving mechanism, and it develops into a problem when it continues for too long. So only by us understanding this process can we interrupt this process from becoming dangerous.
Can we reverse it though?
So now we understand the initial questions that I asked you. Why do we get infarctions of the heart but rarely of other organs? The answer is the coronary arteries of the pumping heart expose the underlying weakness first. Secondly, why we get atherosclerosis but not venous sclerosis? Because blood pressure exists in high levels only in the arteries. Your veins don't have 120 millimeter Hg. So it's only your arteries that are exposed to the pressure. And we understand the final and most decisive question, why do animals not get heart attacks but people do? Is because we don't manufacture vitamin C in our bodies. to stabilize our artery walls. Your cat, your dog does. And that's also the reason why in these ship journeys in the 15th and 16th century, when the mostly British sailors tried to circumnavigate the globe, the ship cats returned, while the sailors were on the ground of the sea, died from scurvy. So the reason why the ship cat returned in 1580 is the same reason why your house cat doesn't get heart attacks today. And the reason why our ancestors, or why the people, human beings, sailors died from scurvy centuries ago is the same reason why heart attacks are an epidemic among people today. It's so logical, it's so simple. And here we are, 25 years after publishing these results for the first time, still talking to a selected audience of curious people. And it's not yet mainstream. But I can tell you the days are counted, because the logic is so compelling that it is getting more and more impossible for the status quo to build up a wall of illiteracy in front of you. And just last week I heard that the British Medical Journal, certainly not a journal on the progressive side of humanity, and certainly not a journal that is fighting the pharmaceutical interests, is coming out with a special journal on nutrition. They have to. The train is starting and they need to be on that train. That's why they have to do that. There was a question about reversibility. Can we reverse existing deposits? Well, again, that question was fantastic to study in this animal model that we just introduced here. So what we did is, over 12 weeks, we fed these animals a high-fat diet to build up quick the atherosclerotic deposits in these animals that do not have any vitamin C collagen protection. And then we split this entire group that was fed for 12 years, this high-fat diet, into 1, 2, 3, 4 subgroups. One group was continued to get low vitamin C and served as a control. One was continued to get high vitamin C. One high vitamin C plus lysine, an amino acid that is part of the collagen molecule. And one was high vitamin C, lysine, and vitamin B3, a niacin. And again, I can only shortly browse through the results. These are the deposits after 12 weeks of high-fat diet. So when we continued in the group that got too little vitamins for another, 8 weeks, of course the deposits increased, as you can see here. When we gave high vitamin C to this group here, we could see that there was a beginning decrease of the deposits from control to high vitamin C group. When we combined high vitamin C with lysine, we saw that there was a further decrease. And when we added niacin, vitamin B3, this was the result. So there does not exist a single pharmaceutical drug in the world that gives you these results. And there's also a reason for that. We investigated and found out the substances that the body, your body, uses itself. And we just add it in higher amounts from outside. So we don't need to invent molecules and find new meanings so that we can patent them and sell it to you expensively with big advertisement. We used the body's own solutions to these problems. So the number was, blood development was reversed by 85% in these studies. Now you may say, well, this was an animal model study. What about clinical proof? Well, already in 1996, which is 22 years ago, we published our first clinical study exactly for this problem. It was done in patients with existing coronary deposits, measured by what is called ultra-fast computed tomography. You can see the machine here. It's a form of scan that measures the calcium deposits in those patients, in the coronary arteries of those patients. And as you can see, this was their coronary artery score, CAS score, before the study. And then we put them on a tested combined formula that had those three elements that I just mentioned, plus additional, about 20 additional factors that are needed for optimum cellular function. And you could see that after 6 months on this program, we could essentially stop these calcium deposits to further increase. It is not a significant reduction yet, because obviously the cells need some time to understand what we want them to do. And when we checked after 12 months, we could clearly see the results here. So that was an almost complete stop. And in some of these patients, we could see a complete reversal. This was a 51-year-old businessman. In this scan, you look from the bottom into the heart with this technology. So this is the left coronary artery, and this is the deposit, calcium deposit in this artery. There are lipoproteins there too. Calcium is only the thing that this method can visualize nicely in form of white colors. And you see the same patient, the same heart, the same left coronary artery, the same spot, and there are no more deposits. This wasn't the result of a bypass surgery or of angioplasty. It was the result of using knowledge, how the body can help itself. The knowledge that I'm transferring to you tonight. So, in summary, cardiovascular disease is not a fatalistic disease ordained by God on the people or by fate. It is a regulatory process. It protects the artery wall at times when we do not give our body enough vitamins to provide the stability and protect the artery walls. And we also know that in principle, the formation of these deposits is reversible by an optimum intake of micronutrients. In conventional cardiology, this is not the case. Otherwise, they wouldn't perform bypass or angioplasty. You do that because you have no other solution, right? It's a mechanical, almost medieval way of treating the problem. The word bypass essentially contains what they do. They bypass the problem. Yeah? This is a short movie that summarizes our knowledge. Atherosclerosis does not start with too much fat. These are micronutrients that are circulating, vitamins that are circulating through. If they decrease, we will see that in a moment that they slowly decrease. Then watch here, the endothelial lining, the cells that separate the bloodstream from the artery wall become leaky. Early scurvy. And now fat particle, marked in yellow, enter the artery wall through those leaks, through those gaps between these endothelials. And this leads slowly to a buildup of the deposits. And of course, as we know, in principle, it is reversible. It doesn't mean that I'm teaching here that all forms of atherosclerosis can be reversed, especially not when there are already advanced stages that are complicated lesions. Then it is impossible to reverse it, or you can only reverse a certain part that is still accessible to these regulatory mechanisms. But for early forms of cardiovascular disease, it is possible. We went ahead and we studied, can we test the production of these valuable collagen molecules in the cells of the human body that build collagen, that form those molecules? And the answer you can see here. This was a basic composition of micronutrients that was able to produce collagen way above the control, about 30 to 40% above the control. The reason why this is so low is because you can see there's a bigger result coming. When there are additional elements like chondroitin sulfate and glycosaminoglycans and additional proline and lysine, all components of the artery wall, then you can increase the collagen production in these artery wall cells above 100%. And then when you add really high levels of proline, lysine, vitamin C on top of these two compositions, then you get a result that is 400% above the control. Now, where do you get the details of this information? Obviously, I cannot advertise things here in this talk. There are doctors here, Dr. Katsonis, other colleagues that are open to nutritional advice for people affected here in the audience. There are health food interested people here. They can give you this kind of advice. For me, it is important to show you we can. To bring you the proof that we tested it and that it works. Briefly, let's talk about two other health problems that are very common, arrhythmia and heart failure. We studied the question, where does arrhythmia come from? Now, obviously, arrhythmia part is the result of a heart attack. After a heart attack, there are tissue areas in your heart destroyed that can no longer conduct the electricity for a regular pumping heart. But the great majority of irregular heartbeat, especially in young women, I'm explaining that in a minute, comes from micronutrient deficiency. So we studied the effect of a micronutrient composition that we specifically developed to address energy supply to heart muscle cells. And we could find that the episodes of irregular heartbeat in those patients, double-blind, placebo-controlled clinical study, was reduced in half. I owe you the explanation why young women. If we now know that micronutrients are actually micronutrient deficiency is a primary cause for irregular heartbeat, we can answer the question why women in the childbearing age are having this problem more than men, because of the menstrual cycle. They not only lose blood, they also lose micronutrients, vitamins. And if you don't supplement them, you are exposing the patient, yourself perhaps, to these problems that can be addressed in this way. Heart failure. This is a clinical study that was done at the University Clinic in Berlin. They studied a micronutrient composition in patients who had heart failure. These are the patients who have heavy breathing. They cannot walk long distances anymore. They cannot walk staircases without standing still and catching breath. They have edema in their legs. So this study documented micronutrient supplementation to these patients will actually increase the pumping function of their heart by 5% as it relates to the measurement itself, but 20% when you compare it to the pre-existing system. I'm showing that in this graph. The placebo group did not receive micronutrients. And the pumping function of their heart was actually decreasing slightly. This was the study group. That was the pumping of their heart before they received micronutrients, and that was the pumping function after they received the micronutrients for 9 months. And even though the dosage was relatively little, they had a significant effect. Now 5% may sound little for you, but it is for patients with heart disease. 5% difference is the difference between life and death in many cases. Why am I making a point of out of heart failure? Well, we talked already about the heart being the only organ in the body that is under constant mechanical stress. It's like the motor in your car. Now, which part of your car uses the gasoline? The windscreen wiper? The wheels? The engine. Well, nothing else in your body. The heart muscle cells have a huge demand on energy. If you give it to them, everything is fine. If you are not giving these energy molecules to them, and micronutrients, most micronutrients have this role of being carriers of bioenergy, then it fails. Heart failure. Lack of gasoline. Again, we studied, can we improve the production of energy molecules in the body? The key molecule is so-called ATP. Many of you already heard it. Adenosine triphosphate. Forget the name. There is one molecule how you can measure energy in your body's cells. ATP. We measure the production of ATP in muscle cells. And we could see that, again, with the basic formula, we could increase the energy production by more than 100%. If we have a special energy formula added, we can increase it by more than 200%. And if we add coenzyme Q10 to this combination, we can almost reach 300% increased energy production. Again, the details you'll get from the people that I mentioned before, or you can get a first overview on all these health problems by reading the book. Here at the bottom you see the websites. It's essentially the title of the book, Why Animals Don't Get Heart Attacks.org. So I'm not here to promote my book. You can read it for free. So now at the end of my talk, we need to address the question, what are the dangers from conventional medicine of treating diseases without understanding its true nature? Well, let's start with heart failure. We know that micronutrient deficiency is a primary cause of the failing pumping function of the heart. The result of that is that water accumulates in your body because the heart is no longer pumping properly and the pressure is not sufficient to pump the blood through your system without losing water in the tissue. Now, you go to the doctor, you say, I have this water in my legs. The doctor says, no problem. I have a solution for this. And he prescribes you water pills, diuretics. What do diuretics do? They flush out the water, but they also flush out what? So you go to the doctor and he promises you a treatment that for the moment appears to be the solution, but it kills you. And suddenly we understand why heart failure is actually a disease that has a dreadful prognosis. 5 years after the first time you meet the doctor, 50% of the patients are dead. You can read it online, you can read it in the textbooks of cardiology. No one cares. Why? You need to come tonight to this lecture to hear something that people should learn in primary, kids should learn it in primary school. Calcium channel blockers. I'm sure that some of you are familiar with this kind of thing. It's been a fact known since about 20 years, or actually already more than 20 years, 1995. Up to 60% increased risk for heart attacks if you take calcium blockers. Again, you come to the doctor, you say, oh, doctor, you have this pressure on my heart. He will make a test or two and he will say, well, you know, you have those deposits, they're not life-threatening, so let's try with some drug. I have something here. He gives you calcium antagonists. Well, we studied the effect of calcium antagonists. This is a cell here, schematically, obviously. This is the gate by which calcium can enter this cell. Therefore, channel, it's symbolic, a channel. And here, this green block is the blocker that blocks calcium to enter from outside the cell to the inside of the cell. So far, so good. We ask the question, what else do those blockers block out? And we found they block out vitamin C. So by taking calcium blockers, you cause chronic scurvy in your body. Because vitamin C is needed for collagen production. Do you understand this? So here are the research results. We asked the question, if we give the most common calcium antagonist, which is called by its technical name nifedipine, how much does nifedipine decrease collagen production in these cells? Well, here's what it is. 99%. But you can do something about it. If your doctor insists you need to take this, you can add vitamin C. And you can overcome this problem. By increasing the amount of vitamin C, you make sure that some of those molecules come through. Something interesting about those bars that you see here is the following. Here on those blue bars, we used ascorbic acid. And on those brown bars, we used ascorbyl palmitate, which is a fat-soluble form of vitamin C. And these units do not mean much to you, but you can see that there's a difference from, let's pick this one, from 100 micromolar to 10 micromolar. Or to start at this level here, if we say 83% or 89% restoration of collagen. So these bars mean that from 0 you can lift the collagen production of the cell almost to normal. 83, 89% respectively. What it means, what these numbers mean at the bottom is, if you take ascorbyl palmitate, you need only 10% of the amount to get the same effect. So not only do we understand now what the problem is with calcium blockers, we can give you and the doctors in this room and the therapists and the health food stores, we can give a recommendation for people who want to avoid that by taking prescription drugs, they suffer potentially deadly side effects. 60% increased rate of heart attacks is a significant number. We went through this. Why does this irrational business still go on, in this case with calcium antagonists? Well, here's the reason.
And I thought it was humanity.
So that drug alone brings the drug companies 5 billion in US language, but in European language 5 milliard euros alone each year. Selling a symptom-oriented drug that in the long run does the opposite. So I'm coming back to the beginning. Linus Pauling, a scientist who has seen the last century, he died in 1994. He got 2 Nobel Prizes. He had 54 honorary doctor degrees. But this was his last public call. And this is his own handwriting. A call for an international effort to abolish heart disease, written by him in his handwriting. You can read it here, to abolish heart disease. Abolish means end, eliminate, not just reduce. And this call, you can read the entire document online, ends the goal of eliminating heart disease as the major cause of death and disability is now in sight. And he signed it with his name and my name. He wanted me to speak tonight in Nicosia. That's why he did this. Oh, what do you think why he did this? He is gone for 25 years. Who do you think that his work and my work, who will continue that? Who do you think will spread what you heard tonight?
The people
People who listen to you.
Who are the people?
Us.
Ah, that's what I wanted to hear. You. If you don't do it, nobody will. The interests, the money that is being made from maintaining diseases, from fooling you, from taking your money, your health, and your life, is so gigantic that there's zero interest to change that. Prevention makes up 5% of the health expenditures in most industrialized nations. 95% go to this nonsense. Sorry, not this one, but the one we saw before. On calcium antagonists. And these are not just two drugs. You can go on and throughout medicine. What do you think that chemotherapy does? The most frequent side effect of chemotherapy that is given to you to do what? To heal you from cancer. That's what they may promise you. Most frequent side effect is to cause new cancer in your body.
Why is it still allowed to go on?
So I'm here to say there's no one else that will change that except you. You don't need to believe me tonight, but I want you to think what you heard. And if you come to the conclusion that it is true, that there will be no change except if you do it, then I expect you to do something. You've heard about the possibilities that Dr. Katsonis and his wife and the Movement of Life are helping. You heard about the efforts that they are undertaking in the health field and other areas. Take responsibility. You're not just doing that for yourself. Think about the next generation. Think about the generation of your children, grandchildren. What will you say to them if they ask you in 10 years or 20 years, Dad, you knew that? And you say, I was sitting on the fence. Maybe it would have become mainstream. No. You are responsible to make this mainstream, not the doctors in the university departments. For those of you who think that I'm bad-mouthing doctors, I'm not. I'm myself a doctor. I'm sorry to say I didn't hear any of this in my entire 6 years of medical training. If you want to become the director of a clinical department at the University of Berlin, or Paris, or New York, I don't know about Athens and Nicosia. You may inquire yourself. You have to fulfill 3 criteria. You have to be a good teacher. Makes sense. You have to be a good researcher. Makes sense. And you have to bring money. It's called third-party money. This is an official criterion for you to be appointed head of the department. Where do you get the money from? From the Farmers Association of Nicosia? Certainly not. So this is how the pervasive influence of the pharmaceutical industry on the minds of the doctors is secured for generations to come if you are not interrupting that. We published documents that outline what you can do. Important things are that there are centers in each city where natural preventive health is the topic, where people can come and get consultation, are referred to doctors that practice that, are referred to centers that can help them with special cases. But there has to be this primary location where you go to and you get reliable information, where you're not lied at. And the other aspect is make sure that this knowledge about health, nutrition, preventive aspect of health enters the schools as early as possible. I'm here because by some strange coincidence my life took a turn on this one molecule. The last 25 years we spent on proving that these outrageous, fantastic concepts of having the possibility of eliminating the #1 killer on this planet is actually tangible, is close to becoming reality. Tonight I'm here to talk to you and say there are now 60,000 studies out on PubMed documenting the health benefits of vitamins on human health. Whoever questions that outs himself or herself into the age of illiteracy. We are in the driving seat. And this is why I say all of us, we all carry this responsibility to help make this knowledge a reality in every country we live. Today, Cyprus. And this is the dimension, just to send you home with this picture. 18 million people die each year from the consequences of health illiteracy. Preordained on you, on the people of this planet, by those who make money from the continuation of this health problem. $18 million is the number of inhabitants of New York City. If we don't act, this tragedy will go on. Every year, the number of people living in New York will disappear from this planet because we do not act. I'm at the end of my talk. I thank you for coming. I hope there were some aspects of my talk that will stay with you and that we see each other again. Thank you very much.